In this video, I'm going to show you how to control other MIDI devices with your Yamaha Montage or ModX, and it's actually going to unlock being able to go musically deeper with your gear, because it's going to eliminate having to think about your settings and patches live.
It's funny how money changes situation. Miscommunication lead to complication.
So on this tour, I play a wide range of complicated sounds and effects. And for a fast-paced environment like this, I need to be able to get to whatever I need on any of my 3 keyboards quickly. There's no room to still be looking for the right patch as the song starts, or for my arpeggiator or delay time to accidentally be set to the wrong tempo. I need to be able to hit one button and have everything switched to the right settings right away. And I need it to work every time. So I use the Montage M6 to basically be the brain of my rig, tempo syncing everything and managing all the patches across every keyboard. In this demo, I'm going to show you how to do it on the new Montage M, but if you're working with the old Montage or the ModX, you'll be able to follow along too. Okay, so how do we do it? So on the Yamaha Montage and ModX, a patch, which on the Yamaha is called a performance, can contain several parts. Now normally that means several different sounds layered, but the superpower of the Yamaha is that you can also embed MIDI messages within any of the parts using a little known feature called Zone Master. First we need to configure a couple settings on the keyboard, starting with setting the Yamaha to send MIDI out of its MIDI ports rather than the USB port. Press Utility, and from the settings menu go to MIDI I/O, and make sure that MIDI in/out is set to MIDI. If you're on the older Montage or ModX, you'll also need to go to the Advanced tab and turn Zone Master on. Okay, next go to the Performance page to see the settings and parts for the sound that you're on. Click on one of the empty parts to add a new part. And from the Category menu, click on Init, which means we're adding an initialized patch, a default sound. Now, what sound you put here doesn't really matter, and you could do this with any of the parts that are already in the Performance rather than adding this part, but I like to separate the parts that send MIDI data from the parts that make noise. It just helps me stay organized. Now hit the Performance button again, and you'll see your new part in whatever slot you added it to. Okay, now turn the volume on this part all the way down, and turn the key range all the way down too. We don't want this part to actually make any noise. Now, click into the new part, choose Edit from the vertical menu on the left, and go into the Zone settings. On the older Montage and ModX, this is in the Part Settings category. On the new Montage, set the Part mode to External. On the older Montage or ModX, you'll have to turn the Zone button on. Once you do that, a bunch of other options will appear. Once again, turn the key range or zone note limit to 0, because we don't want this part making any noise or sending any MIDI note data. Choose a MIDI channel to transmit to. This will have to match the channel that your other device is on so that it receives the message. Now look for MIDI bank MSB, MIDI bank LSB, and MIDI program number. This is where you set the actual bank and program number to send to your other MIDI devices. Set the MIDI bank and program numbers, and whatever device is on the corresponding MIDI channel will switch to that program when this performance is loaded up in the Yamaha. Check it out. Now, in order for this to work with your gear, you may have to do some things in the settings of your receiving devices, but I can only guide you through it very generally because I don't know what gear you have. But there's a few things that you'll definitely need to be aware of. First, your other MIDI devices need to be set to the correct MIDI channels. If I'm transmitting to channel 15 from the Yamaha, then the receiving device has to be on MIDI channel 15. Your device is probably by default set to MIDI channel 1 or MIDI channel all, and you'll have to Google how to set it to another MIDI channel, which is usually very easy. You also need to know about a dumb little thing with Yamaha and MIDI, which is that for some reason this does not work on MIDI channel 1. If it's on channel 1, you won't be able to stop the Yamaha from sending MIDI note data along with the program change, meaning you hit a note on one keyboard and that note sounds on the other keyboard too, which is not what we're trying to do. Yes, I've already made sure that the Yamaha itself is not on MIDI channel 1. Whatever, just use the other MIDI channels. My other 2 keyboards are on 15 and 16. Secondly, you need to plug in your MIDI cables correctly. I have a MIDI cable going from the MIDI out of the Yamaha into MIDI in of the second keyboard, out from the thing that sends the message into the thing that receives it. And since I'm controlling multiple boards, I have another cable going from the MIDI through of the second board to MIDI in on the third board. Thirdly, it'll take some trial and error to figure out which program change messages correspond to which presets on the receiving device. Sometimes it's as simple as telling the Yamaha to send program 4 and the other keyboard just goes to program 4. But different devices organize banks and presets differently, and sometimes you have to add or subtract a bank or program number in order to get it to line up. Like if I want to load program 404 on my sequential Prophet, I'll send bank 4 program 5 from the Yamaha. Just a weird little thing. Fourthly, many modern keyboards can send and receive MIDI over both USB and MIDI in-out ports. Sometimes you have to go into the settings and specify which one to use. In this case, we're using the MIDI ports. We did this in the beginning with the Yamaha when we set the MIDI in-out to MIDI, and you might have to do something similar on the receiving devices too. Lastly, if you want your other devices to follow the tempo of the Yamaha too, this is very easy to set up. On the Yamaha, press Utility, and in the Settings menu go to MIDI I/O. Set MIDI sync to MIDI, and toggle on the clock out switch. Now the Yamaha will send clock out of its MIDI ports. Now, on the receiving device, you may have to go into the settings and tell it to listen to incoming clock signals. On my sequential Prophet, I just go to the MIDI clock setting and make sure it's on in rather than out. And now it follows the tempo of the Yamaha. Easy. Okay, now if you set all this up correctly, then you should be able to have a performance on the Yamaha that's named according to a song in your setlist, with the tempo of that song saved to that performance, and when you load up that performance, then all of your other MIDI devices, whether they be keyboards, pedals, or otherwise, should all switch automatically to the right patches and tempo. Now, quick disclaimer, I'm sure there are keyboards and pedals where this won't work. I could see this not working smoothly or consistently on older gear, or gear where the presets are not organized in simple bank and program numbers. So don't be in the comments being like, hey, I can't get this to work with my Roland 89X10 whatever, because I don't know what to tell you. Maybe it doesn't work with that. What I can say for sure is that using exactly what I've described here, I've used the Montage and the ModX to control a number of my keyboards and pedals, and it's worked flawlessly every time. So I hope this video was helpful. For me, this actually unlocked being able to play the sounds that I wanted to play in a live setting. Because if your setup is complicated, you're just not going to remember every setting on every keyboard and pedal and get to it in time. It's way better to just set it all up in advance and then only think about hitting that one button so you can just focus on the music.